unions are making a fuss. They often do. What do they want? A living wage.
What should the minimum be?
At least $15 an hour.
$20 an hour.
$30, $35 an hour.
$30 an hour?
You tell me how much money I need, Mr. Newsman.
I don't know.
Because you were spoon-fed right out of high school into college with your preppy everything, and you know nothing about us out here.
Do I know nothing? Then I want to learn. Unions. That's our show tonight.
And now, John Stossel.
This month it was the Chicago Teachers Union that got the media's attention. That strike's over, but this battle for control of the schools will continue, and I'll keep covering it. But the basic issue of who gets to decide how to manage a workplace, who has the power, and who pays, this applies to much more than just teachers and Chicago taxpayers. All unions say it's good for America if unions protect workers from arbitrary dismissals, for example. But is that true? I say no, because all union agreements that make it hard to fire people and require that everyone be treated equally are bad for taxpayers and customers and even union workers themselves. But this is not intuitive, and I had no luck when I brought that argument to some union workers. This August, thousands of union members came here to Philadelphia to say, we need a second Bill of Rights.
That included a right to full employment, a living wage, and so on. I had a number of arguments with them that I'll get to eventually, but let's start with just one. Why, when some workers are much more effective than others, do union rules mean the slackers, the real goof-offs, can't be fired?
Does it bother you that the slacker gets paid what you get paid?
No, because there is no slacker.
Nobody's scooping off?
No, everybody's there to do a job.
In the union, we have to reach out and bring that person up to speed. We have to bring out, every one of us is responsible for the next person. That's why they call it. But do they all get up to speed? Absolutely. Absolutely.
All of them?
Absolutely.
They're all up to speed. Who knew? Well, John Tillman of the Illinois Policy Institute has been studying the Illinois Teachers Union and other unions. It's hard to fire a teacher. I assume they're all up to speed.
Well, they're all equal, John. This is the great irony of the unions. There's what I like to call the union ceiling.
People like that.
People don't like that if your children is in the classroom with a teacher who's below par, who can't be fired. Parents don't like that. What parents would like is to be able to identify those teachers who are exceptional and reward them with merit pay, but that's not what the unions want. What the unions want is everybody treated the same, even though we know they're different.
If there were more of a market in education, they're spending in the Chicago area $13,000 per student. The best teachers might make $300,000 a year.
The exceptional teachers who take kids coming out of poor neighborhoods in Chicago would be greatly rewarded. The problem is with the Chicago Teachers Union strike we just had is what they were fighting for is a lack of accountability, a lack of measurement. They don't want to be held accountable by parents. And the real tragedy of this, John, is that there was no parent at that negotiating table in Chicago.
Now, I have to believe that most of the teachers want to do the right thing, and they want more for themselves, but the numbers are interesting, and I don't think most of the public knows this. The average wage in America is about $40,000 a year. The Chicago teachers make how much?
$71,000 by the union's own numbers. The school district says $76,000, highest in the country.
Not including pension.
Not including pension.
Medical, which brings it up to maybe 80 or 90. That's more per hour than architects, nurses, accountants get. And they don't work that long.
No, in fact, John, the thing that's amazing about Chicago is we have the shortest school day of the entire year, the fewest minutes in front of a class.
We have this graph that starts with the national average, and yet they say they're overworked.
A child going to a Chicago school, K through 12, would get about 3 years less instruction than a child going to a Houston school. That's the difference. That's one of the reasons that the teachers who are so well paid actually perform so poorly compared to other school districts. Only 4 out of 10 kids don't graduate from Chicago high schools.
And teachers tell me, you're not counting all the time I do away from school. I take work home. And they do, but the government's Bureau of Labor Statistics calculated that, and they still found the average public school teacher works 36.5 hours per week. It's less than a 40-hour week.
It's a short week, and that's because the average school day in Chicago is 5 hours and 45 minutes. Do you think you can get much of a good education 5 hours and 45 minutes? In Chicago, the charter schools work longer. They take work home, too. They're graduating 76% compared to the general average in Chicago system of 56%.
And the charter school teachers, I don't see them striking.
No, they're not on strike. There's 50,000 kids that were in school.
They're
charter
paid less.
Schools. They're paid less, $48,000 on average for a charter school teacher. Many of the charter school teachers actually left the Chicago public school system and that higher wage to come and teach where they could actually get in front of a classroom and make a difference in kids' lives flexibly.
The teachers, apparently, under the union system, 93%, they must be very good, 93% are rated either superior or excellent.
Where do you know anywhere in the world where somebody, out of any 100 people you want to pick, where 93 of them are good to excellent? That's what I meant by the union ceiling. Everybody's the same. It's a strange distortion of this idea of all people being created equal. We know that some people are exceptional teachers, and the amazing thing is the union does not want to identify them. They want to put them in the pool with all the people who are doing a poor job and dragging the overall performance down. I think that's the real outrage.
Now, Kennedy, I'd like to bring you into this discussion. She's the Stossel Show's special correspondent. She also went to that big union rally in Philadelphia. She got a more hostile reception than I did. But
that's hard.
Well, before I get to that, Kennedy, your daughter is in public school. I should call them government schools.
Yes, that's
in
correct.
Los Angeles. So what's your reaction to what John says?
Well, I hear what he says, and as a parent, it's really scary because all you want for your child is the best possible classroom experience. That is the most important thing, and there has to be some level of accountability. I mean, as a parent, I would love if my involvement helped in rating teachers. You know, they don't want to be rated on the tests. They don't want to be rated on students' performance. What metric are you possibly going to use?
And these they that
They're
you're
magical
smearing,
powers?
These they include your parents who were teachers.
Yeah, both my parents were educators at various points in their careers. And, you know, my mom says the same thing. She knows that there are wonderful, brilliant teachers out there who change people's lives. Think about the best teacher you had growing up, and they still have an impact on you. I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could trust that our kids are going to have those experiences? And when it's all about the unions, and it's all about the stranglehold, and it's all about the pensions and benefits, it makes teachers the enemy, and they shouldn't be. They should be part of the thing that makes children in this country more successful, so we blossom on a global scale.
But, John, the union says it's not just about money, that they don't think this rating system is fair, that you can get a group of kids who don't have parents who care, and those teachers may be brilliant, but struggle harder to raise their scores. They'll be unfairly judged.
This is one of the really shameful things that happened in Chicago is the unions have been blaming some of the hardships that these kids who come into the school system face every day. The whole point...
Well, some of those kids are difficult to teach.
There's no question, but the whole point that we're making, and frankly that the mayor was making, is that what you want to do is identify those teachers who take those kids with those disadvantages and move them farther faster and reward them better than those teachers who can't deal with those kids. And yet that is the very thing the union is trying to avoid, is that kind of measurement and that kind of accountability. And you can't improve the system unless you get that.
Now, let's go back to that union rally where the unions wanted a second Bill of Rights to protect workers. And I was pleased that most of the protesters I talked to were civil. Some yelled, but we could have an argument. Kennedy had a different experience, maybe because she had the nerve to propose a second Bill of Rights, an employer's Bill of Rights.
Everyone's running around with a brand new Bill of Rights, and I felt lonely. So we crafted something to really protect small business owners.
The right to hire and fire.
Absolutely.
The right to relocate my business from anywhere to anywhere.
The right to determine wage level.
Kennedy spent more time at the rally than I. She marched along, and all was fine until she tried to get workers to sign her petition for that employer's Bill of Rights.
Working people don't make enough as it is right now.
Why don't you want to build America to be the best America can possibly be?
I think you should go away.
I think you should go away.
I'm questioning your Bill of Rights.
That's not a fire engine. That siren came from some union members whose response to Kennedy's proposal was drowning her out.
Who are you? What are you kidding me?
So what was that about? They didn't want you heard? They didn't want their people They just didn't like the question?
No, and a lot of the thug bosses, they didn't want union members to think for themselves. They didn't want them to express their opinions to someone from the media. And they were really upset that someone from Fox Business was there showing what was going on at the rally. And,
And they were until you raised the concept of an employer having some rights, too.
I am sympathetic to small business owners. My husband owns a small business. And you talk about teachers spending 36 hours a week on a job they love, they're passionate about. My husband is up until 2, 3 in the morning. And to succeed, it takes globes of steel. And that is why I'm so sympathetic to business owners in this country, in this environment, as taxes go up. And
by contrast, at the rally, many union workers acted as if they own their jobs. Civil rights laws do say employers can't fire you because of age, gender, race, disability. The unions take it further. They say the employer has no right to say no religious displays or that you have to dress professionally.
The guy doesn't like the way I dress. You cannot buy me.
Who is the determiner of my wage?
Well, your boss.
No.
No. So the boss invests in the company and he doesn't get to determine the wage. And that's the attitude among many Americans.
Well, and by the way, the idea of collective bargaining, it's so condescending. I mean, it basically says that individuals are not able to think for themselves, that they cannot negotiate cogently for themselves. And that is such an insult.
Well, some people are not wise to this, and they want to get together and bargain, and that's freedom of association.
Then, you know what? Go to a flea market on a Saturday. That doesn't mean that you have to impose your will writ large on the rest of the country, because most people don't want to be a part of a union, and public unions, whether you like it or not, are bankrupting states like California.
And Illinois.
And Illinois, we're well on our way. $203 billion in unfunded debt. And the problem, John, with all of this, and the reason we have such a problem...
It's a race between Illinois and California.
It is a race, right to the bottom, unfortunately. And the bad news for the union members that they don't yet know is taxpayers can leave. And when the money runs out, the union members won't get it because the taxpayers have exited to other states. But the key point of all of this is that these unions are monopoly providers of services. That's why 350,000 kids were not in school. And as a monopoly provider of service, they are taking control of our government at the local and state level away from we the people. And that's the thing that we have to start focusing on and reassert control.
The monopoly part is interesting because I don't see people striking outside movie theaters or supermarkets. It's the monopoly government area.
I think it really tells us who has the power in this relationship. The mayor, who had a reputation for being a tough guy, was completely essentially rolled by the union and had to go to a court to try to get them to come back to work. And the union had all the power and all the control because they are that provider of service, a monopoly
provider. Unlike the supermarket, which has competition. One strikes, they might all lose their job.
The only way to create a mechanism of accountability in education, for example, is school choice that empowers the parents instead of empowering the school system or the union.
Why is that such a dirty concept, though? I don't understand
It's not. We're for it on this show. Thank you, John Tillman and Kennedy. Coming up, did you know that some government workers use your tax money to do union work full time? That's next. We've heard stories of those government employees who leave work at 3 o'clock or retire with a big pension at age 55. But what if I told you that even when government employees do work, some are not working for you? You pay so they can work for their union. It does happen. The practice is called official time because the government officially allows workers to spend time on union work. Some employees do it full time. Georgia Congressman Phil Gingrey is upset about that, and he's introduced a bill to end the practice. So explain, what happens?
John, back in 1978, President Jimmy Carter in the Civil Service Reform Act allowed federal union workers to have what's called official time, which just simply means that the union can designate one of their people to represent the group of employees in a federal agency like the Department of Defense, probably the biggest offender, to represent that group all day long and get paid their full salary for their expertise within the Department of Defense, and they're not doing anything but just sitting there.
They're not doing weapons procurement or whatever he might be doing at the department. He's just doing what? Doing negotiating contracts?
Well, the collective bargaining, mediation, arbitration, talking about how sharp the pencils need to be, the size of the erasers, the number of paper clips.
All right, but you have no evidence that that's... I mean, they have these work rules, but you're exaggerating.
Well, in the reports that are on a voluntary basis, agency or the Office of Personnel Management says to each agency, we want you to report every year how much time was spent, how much official time, and the total amount of money that was exhausted. Like in 2010, it was $130 million. So over a 10-year period of time, the total amount of wasted money that we, the taxpayer, are spending, so these unions can sit around on behalf of their own group and they
get more money from the taxpayer
and negotiating for more money, more pension, more health care. My bill just simply says that we don't take away their right to collective bargaining. And they can negotiate all day long, but do it on the union's dime, not on my dime, not on the taxpayer's dime.
The president of the American Federation of Government Employees, John Gage, says this official time rule brings gains in quality, productivity, and efficiency year after year. It gives agencies and their employees the means to expeditiously and effectively utilize government input into mission-related challenges of the agency. This is how they talk in government, as well as to bring closure to conflicts that arise.
Well, of course, and as you say, it's government speak, and they're trying to justify. But you've got these two groups, labor and management, pretty much negotiating for each other. And we, the taxpayer, are the ones that suffer because of that.
One employee at the FAA gets $284,000 a year and works entirely on official time, meaning union time.
And they're not doing anything but sitting around trying to decide what piped-in music should be played for their employees.
Well, come on,
during the day.
You keep saying, is that true? You're making stuff up here.
No, I'm not making up anything. We've researched this. We've looked into it very, very carefully.
The music that's piped in?
Yeah.
Okay, and this is not just a federal issue, by the way. States and cities have, where there are unions, they have similar rules. In Phoenix, for example, it's not that big a city, but 6 police officers there do nothing but union work.
And we know when we look at what Governor Walker in Wisconsin, what Governor Christie in New Jersey, absolutely. What my former colleague in Congress, Governor Louis Fortuno in Puerto Rico, has done in regard to reining in this. So we're addressing the problem at the state level. We have not done anything yet at the federal level. And that's what my bill is all about.
Congressman Gingrey, thank you very much. Coming up, every election year, unions donate millions to politicians. What's the effect of that money? Doesn't that make unions the real bosses? When we return, shadow bosses, how government unions control America and rob you blind. At that union rally in Philadelphia, workers told me that unions should have more power. But I say they have plenty already. Elizabeth and Mallory Factor just wrote a book with an ominous title, Shadow Bosses. Government unions, the subtitle, control America and rob taxpayers blind. So, Elizabeth, they control America? They say we're powerless.
Yeah, they do. But they really do control America. They're in government. They're in our military. They're in our national security sites. They're in our schools.
In the private sector, they're now small, where people have a right to choose yes or no. Increasingly, the industries that are not unionized grew, and the union share shrank. But in government, it's bigger than ever.
Yeah, because of course the unionized shops in the private sector go out of business, but the government never goes out of business. And now 41% of government employees all across our nation are unionized, and this is having a very big effect. In fact, we think government employee unions are fueling big government and government growth, and that's one of our big takeaways.
Well, yeah, I'll let you explain how they do it, but they want bigger government because then they get stuff.
It's real easy. It's one of the greatest scams being perpetrated on the American public. Money goes from the government to the unions, to the politicians who are bought and paid for, back to the unions. And I mean, it is an amazing scam.
And in the case of the leaders of the unions, you say they are the true 1%.
Of course. I mean, they gave a lot of money to Occupy Wall Street. You know what Occupy Wall Street should have been occupying? Their plushy headquarters. These are the people who make $500,000 a year. One of them $325,000 in 18 months on private planes. I mean, it is astounding.
Yeah, they make about 10 times what the rank and file union members make. Talk about income inequality.
And you mentioned the plushy offices. That they really are elegant.
Yeah. And
the teachers' union office. I tried to go in to take pictures recently, but I'll do that on. I'll give the explanation of that on another show. But those places are beautiful. You say that the unions support some shadowy causes.
Oh, they sure do. From Media Matters. I don't know if you all know what Media Matters is.
Well, I know because this is a media review group, but it dedicates itself to killing off Fox. So
that's right.
They've come after me.
$100,000 NEA, National Education Association. You know, the teachers' union.
Teachers.
Right, the teachers' union. But the rank and file members don't know that. But also AFSCME, American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees, gave them money. The AFL-CIO gave them money. But you know what the teachers classified it as? Public relations.
Right.
Well, it is. It's public relations for their side. And Media Matters and the Democrats say more money for unions. So.
See, but the members don't know this. The members never get a chance to know how this money's being spent. When it's classified as public relations, it just goes into administration and overhead.
And the members seem happy when I go to union rallies. They're all enthused.
Well, I would disagree with you on that. When they have an opportunity to have their job without having to be part of a union, they vote pretty quickly to not. In Wisconsin, when they weren't forced to pay tribute or to be a member of the union to keep their job, half left like that.
Yeah, and it's important to give all of those rank and file union members a real voice and a vote.
See, unions are not pro-worker. They're pro-shadow bosses.
Elizabeth, you got my attention when you talked about the military. I assume the military is an exception.
A third of the military are civilian employees, and of those, 60% are already unionized. That means that you have unions on military bases filing grievances and telling people how they can use these civilian employees. In fact, we found a grievance that was hilarious, where the union had filed a grievance on a military base when the price of soda went from 50 cents to 55 cents.
This constant filing of grievances makes it tough to run an enterprise.
Right, and the poor JAG Corps had to fight that, and imagine how much taxpayer dollars went to just defeat that one grievance. So.
And by national security, you mean Border Patrol,
That's
FEMA,
right.
the Emergency Management Agency, immigration, even NASA scientists.
That's right, even the Peace Corps.
Just looking at Homeland Security, we found 62 people getting paid to do Homeland Security work. And you know what they're doing full time?
What?
Just union work. This is Homeland Security.
Homeland Security is 40% unionized.
Well, I'm depressed. I don't know about you. Thank you. A couple writing a book together and still sitting next to each other. Mallory and Elizabeth Factor. Coming up, more on union power and how two states stood up to it. That's next. Everyone wants more pay. You too, I bet. I negotiate with my boss over my salary and pension, and the boss says yes or no. Government workers do that too. But their negotiation is a little different because their boss doesn't really pay the bill. Their boss is a politician who is likely to be long gone by the time, say, the bill for retirees' medical care comes due. The result is that politicians make so many promises to government workers, and as a result, cities and some states are trillions of dollars in the red. So, where will tomorrow's politicians get the money to pay them, pay what they promised? Well, they'll hit you taxpayers, raise your taxes. And they'll probably stiff some workers. They'll say, oops, sorry, no more money left to pay for yours. You have to pay your own retirement or health care. Now, my favorite expert on this subject is Steve Malanga of the Manhattan Institute, and he points out that 2 states have made smart changes to prevent this pension bomb from going off. One's Utah, and their governor is Gary Herbert. So, Governor Herbert, what'd you do in Utah?
Well, number one, we try to think long-term in Utah. It's not just short-term, it is long-term for a lot of reasons. So we moved from a defined benefit to a defined contribution.
Oh, my God. Please. No, don't say those words. Steve uses them all the time, and they are very important. But I know you right now, when you hear defined benefit, you're switching off. So, I mean, let's try to explain what you're talking about, and maybe that will make it more interesting. So, defined benefit means you politicians define a benefit, and you say, this is what we're going to pay you in the future.
Could be retirement income. You're going to receive some kind of insurance policy, some kind of guaranteed benefit you receive after you retire until you die.
We promise you. As opposed to what, Steve, you encourage states to switch to is...
Well, he used the term defined contribution. It's also typically called a 401k.
Okay.
Right? And that's where you define what the money is that you're going to give the employee in an account so that they can have it towards their retirement, and they build that up over the time. But once you make that contribution, the taxpayer's liability ends at that point. It's not unending.
And you as the worker, it's not like Social Security or Medicare, which is also a promise. This is real money. Money is taken out. There is actual money in your account.
In your account, absolutely, yeah.
And so it's not subject to the whims of politicians, while the other one is just a promise. Hot air, I would say, and there's a good chance over time that there won't be the money to pay it.
Although I would say that the hot air is actually a kind of risk for taxpayers, because in many states, courts say this is guaranteed. So if you come up short over 20 or 30 years, it's the taxpayer who has to make it up. And we're already seeing tax rates go up around the country, at least in part because of this obligation that politicians have not followed through on.
But Rhode Island, which had $6 billion in unfunded liabilities, made a change, went to $3 billion. Utah also, these 2 states. And workers get mad? Workers not like it?
You know, in the beginning, there was concern about what am I losing? And, of course, we explained to them unless we make some changes, the system will, in fact, go bankrupt, and those who are entitled to the benefit will not receive it. The young people coming in, the new employees, could bankrupt the system. So we end up having a 2-track system to kind of keep our promises to the first ones that have a defined benefit, but give choice to those who are coming on board to get it back to actuarially sound.
And in Utah, your pension system was already in such good shape that all you had to do was make a new deal for the new employees. You didn't have to mess with the old plan.
That's right. We were about 100% before the Great Recession hurt. And, you know, as you invest and funds grow and diminish, but this was such a great diminishment of overall money. We lost about $6 billion. We had to take corrective action to make sure that it stayed actuarially sound and, in fact, did not, in fact, become a boondoggle for the taxpayer.
All right, Steve, but Utah is the exception.
Oh, absolutely. Public employees tend to resist any kind of change. They do so in part because their union leaders tell them that 401k style plans don't work, even though, for instance, I'll give you an example. Among teachers in America, 50% of teachers in America leave the profession within 5 years. If they had a 401k, they would take all their money with them. But In a defined benefit plan, you get very little if you leave and switch and go to another job. So basically, this kind of plan is perfect for people who are going to stay in government for their entire lives. Yes, exactly right.
But it's awful for the taxpayer, and the unfunded liability at the moment is $4.5 trillion, up from $2 trillion just in 2008.
Yes, it keeps rising. Here's the thing. This is the irony. 40 states say in the last 2 years they have done reform to their pension system. Yet the liabilities, the debts, that's what they are. The debt keeps growing because most of the reform is extremely superficial.
Unions scream when
they fight this tooth and nail. This is.
I would think they would like to have their own pot of money to hold on to.
Well, I certainly would like to have my own pot of money to hold on. On the other hand, if I were a worker in California and I had a system where after 30 years I could retire with 90% of my salary, which is what you get in California if you're a public safety worker, boy, I tell you, I'd opt for this too.
All right, private sector unions don't get away with this. They can't have unfunded liabilities. Why? What's the difference between the private sector and the government?
Competition. But the thing is that first of all, there were a lot of about 50% of private workers at one point had defined benefit. Companies, however, started going bankrupt as a result of this. Companies had huge costs as a result of this, so they switched. And unions tried to resist, but in a competitive marketplace where you're in the private sector, you can go out of business. The difference is that government doesn't go out of business. Instead, the taxpayer is the backstop to all of this, and that's part of the problem.
FDR said about organizing, all government employees should realize that the process of collective bargaining cannot be transplanted into the public service. The very nature and purpose of government makes it impossible. This is FDR.
That great conservative.
That great conservative. And yet today...
He seems conservative today.
He seems conservative today. You get political points for having done this now, or
absolutely, we get political points because it's good principles. And
but the public understands this?
The public does understand it. And we are one of only 7 states, and we just got our rating from New York here just last Friday, a AAA bond rating from all 3 rating agencies, a triple, one of only 7 states. And it makes a difference when we go forward. When we recruit businesses and people look for certainty and predictability going forward, where do they want to build?
They want to know there's real money there.
They want to know that we're balancing our budgets. The employees want to know that there's something real. And one of the selling points to change our process was to say, hey, look what? You can take money with you when you leave, whenever you leave. You don't have to just get it till you die. It can be passed on to your children.
In Chicago, Rahm Emanuel said, if we don't fix our pension system, you won't get people to move here, you won't get businesses to move here, because they know that what they're doing is they're buying into this enormous debt. So I think what the governor says about the competitiveness of states in terms of their business competitiveness, we're going to see pension liabilities as a part of that in the coming years.
Thank you, Steve Malanga and Governor Herbert. Coming up, the audience gets to weigh in, and I'll tell you the truth about how workers got the 8-hour day. We're back now with your questions and comments for my guests, Elizabeth and Mallory Factor, co-authors of the new book Shadow Bosses, Steve Malanga of the Manhattan Institute, and John Tillman of the Illinois Policy Institute. So, first, from Facebook, from my Facebook page, Ian Wells asks, aren't unions violating free speech rights of their members that don't want to fund, say, Democratic politicians, but they're forced to join the union? I assume this refers to states that are not right-to-work states, either forced union states. That's about 20 of them.
The answer is yes. It is. I believe it is a violation of First Amendment rights. We all believe in First Amendment rights, don't we? We all do, right? You realize that we do have the right to speak, but only one group has the absolute right to be listened to, and that's government employee unions. Nobody has the right to be listened to. They only have the right to speak, except for government employee unions.
What do you mean they have a right to be listened to?
When they're negotiating a contract, you can't walk away from it from the table. The politicians have to listen to them. That is absolutely part of the law.
Yes, sir. Who's first? Go ahead.
My question is about the cycle of money from the unions to the campaigns, then back to the unions again. What's the most effective and easiest way to break this cycle so we don't have these shadow bosses anymore?
Steve, yeah.
Well, choice, first of all. It goes back to Mallory's answer, and that is, in places where you are not allowed to use a member's money for politics unless members agree to it, what happens is political spending by unions drops significantly, because when you ask members, there's a growing discontent among union members with the way their money is being used, not necessarily for organizing or to represent them, but for political purposes, much of which doesn't really have anything to do with representing workers. And the estimate is that only somewhere between a third and 55 or 60% of union money actually represents workers. The rest goes to politics, and it doesn't necessarily help workers.
Another solution would be to go back to the day of that great conservative FDR, who said you can't have government union because they're negotiating their own bosses. That's not going to work. He was right, and we're stuck with what we've got now. Yes, ma'am.
Besides exercising our right to vote, what else can we do as concerned Americans to push back against all of this corruption and incorrect spending of our tax dollars?
You really have to push back at the local government level. The unions are on every field of play. They are putting people out for dog catcher, county supervisor, obviously school boards. They are playing in every field of play, and the only way we're going to wrest control of our government, which is our government, we the people, from the unions who've usurped it, is by you getting involved day to day and grinding it out. What they're confident of is that we won't engage, and we have to engage if we want our freedom.
Thank you all for your bad news in some cases. Coming up, my take on unions and what they really do to workers. Do you remember the fuss that was made when Cabinet Secretary Kathleen Sebelius pushed for her boss's re-election? At a human rights campaign event, she encouraged her audience to make sure Obama continues to be president. Pundits said she should be fired because the law does say government employees may not use their official jobs to try to affect an election. The White House said it was just a mistake, and since she reimbursed the government for her travel expenses, she won't be punished. But some conservatives were furious, still are. They want her fired. But come on. Political appointees do this kind of thing all the time. Kathleen Sebelius is a hardcore big government Democrat. Of course she promotes Obama. That's illegal? What galls me is what's legal. The Wall Street Journal reports that there's a newcomer among the biggest union givers to Obama, the air traffic controllers. Why? Oh, it turns out they started giving more money after President Obama gave them a contract with rich pay increases, more than other government workers got. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. The union says they support the president not because he gave them a big raise, no, because his administration's strong commitment to air safety. Apparently, Mitt Romney is not committed to air safety. It's so sleazy. Why isn't this illegal? Bribery, payola. Just seems wrong. Unions pay to elect politicians who pay them back with your money. Why isn't that a scam? But that's perfectly legal. Crazy, but legal. One final point. At that union demonstration in Philadelphia, something I heard again and again is that unions built the middle class. It was unions, for example, that gave workers an 8-hour workday and time off and higher pay.
You like having a 5-day work week and a weekend? Thank a union member. Okay, the unions built this country.
The 8-hour workday came from where?
From the labor unions fighting for it in the 1930s.
Actually, no, that's not true. In 1914, Henry Ford doubled wages and created an 8-hour workday. To compete, GM and Chrysler then followed suit. That was 30 years before the UAW even existed.
They did it because they wanted to compete for good workers.
You'd think that we'd still have an 8-hour day if there were no unions in the U.S.? No, I'm sorry, you're wrong.
No, she's wrong. They believe in these union myths. Workers' lives have improved in America because of free enterprise, not because of union rules. Well, union contracts help workers for a while, but then they hurt even union workers because their cost or the rigid rules slow growth. And growth is what's best for workers. Again, Henry Ford doubled wages. And then he hired more people, all with no union. Years later, the UAW appears, unionizes the workers, gave them good benefits for a while, but then growth slowed and stopped. That hurt workers. Compare GM with much less unionized Toyota. Over the past 20 years, Toyota created 15,000 jobs, not in Japan, in America. Over that same period, GM lost 400,000 jobs. How's that good for workers? Workers should have a right to unionize, but they should know the downside. It's not just the cost of their union dues, it's the opportunities lost in union shops because union rules limit entrepreneurs' ability to change, to adapt, and grow. It's that freedom, free enterprise, that gives America and workers the power to prosper. That's our show. Thanks for watching. Good night.